So, what's my time looking like? All right. Let's take a look at this flag. So we just finished the 4th of July, and this is something that we all celebrated, right? Independence Day, signing of the Declaration of Independence, and with it, the establishment of this flag, which later was established as our Union of States. But what does this stuff mean? Like, we have all the romantic ideas of applesauce and freedom and, and pie and, tea parties. But why red, white, and blue? Why stars? Why a field of blue? What does this mean? Is there a deeper association? As part of this workshop, what we're going to do now is we're going to break this down, and it's going to take a little bit of time, because as we do, we're going to travel back in time. We're going to visit the sands of ancient Egypt. We're going to look at the crowns that the pharaohs wore, and we're going to realize that the Freemasons who built this country and built this flag, constructed it, knew full well what all that other stuff was, and that they were part of a greater fraternity of people. In fact, every nation which bears the colors red, white, and blue are part of this exact same fraternity. So that would include Great Britain, France, right? There's a bunch of countries like this. Countries that bear just the red and white have a different covenant, but no less important. And the blue is something that we'll discuss. So, red, white, blue. Any takers? Any ideas? No? Yes? No? Okay, we will begin. Ancient Egypt. Are you ready to travel back in time with me? Why would I go to Egypt first? If I mentioned the dollar earlier, correct? And on the back of the dollar we have a pyramid with an all-seeing eye. At one point in one of my videos, I pointed out that the all-seeing eye and then the pyramid coming down like this, I suggested that this could be the sun setting over the ocean. And that this golden path then is the line of the sun as it moves out to the shoreline, right? So, and in fact, the front of everyone, I'm outing myself here, the front of the cover slide of all my videos, right, with the guy walking on the water, it's from the fountain. He's walking on the water, and of course, the angle looks just like this, and then there's this big tree here, right, and then you can see the reflection of the tree. It's this beautifully illustrated concept of the electric universe, right? And this is the golden path. In ancient Egypt, the pharaoh, in ancient Egypt then, and so in keeping mind, here's the sun. There are multiple pyramids, and I suggest to you that the pyramid shape is referential to that culture's interpretation of what it looks like to see the sun in the water. So when you get to the Wats of Asia, they have these really tall Wats they're like that, and so you get this like nice ribbon of water moving out underneath them, and of course the water's got this little like that. In Egypt, of course, it's much broader, right? And you've got this nice, beautiful pyramid. But remember, it's not finished, and the reason it's not finished is because the sun is on top of that, moving its way down. The pharaoh, and it didn't matter, Hatshepsut, oh goodness, never mind. I'll put the name up here in post-production. The only female pharaoh, she also wore a beard. And the beard that the pharaoh wears, here's their little happy face, right? Little eyeballs right there. But the beard means that their head then becomes a symbol of the sun, right? And then the light is ascending. And the way to see that is actually to look behind them when they turn around, and the crown looks like this, and it wraps up down here in a little thing, and then it goes down like that. And then this is raised from behind. This is what their crown looks like from behind. So it's a little sun with rays coming off and descending in the water. So that's what you can do with a complex symbol. Now, why do I mention Egypt? Well, one, because the symbol's on the dollar. It helps to understand that. Two, because Freemasons were such a part of our country's establishment that George Washington was inaugurated in full Masonic regalia, okay, when he became president, to establish that, yes, hey, we're part of the Brotherhood, and this is the way it's going to be. So understanding that, it then helps you to understand that they have a deep abiding appreciation for Egyptian culture and symbology. It's all over the place. And as such, in Egypt, in ancient times, this is the Nile River Delta, and this is the Nile. And this area right up here, to the edge of the delta, this is called Lower Egypt. And from this point up, and it's Upper Egypt because you're getting up into the mountains, right? And this is Upper Egypt. And at one time, Egypt had two kings. And then later on, the two crowns were united into a single crown. I have that right here, so you guys can see this. Wake up. Okay, I won't have that. Having technical difficulty. I can't believe I'm having technical difficulties. Can you check in my bag over there? There's a mouse in that bag, or not that one. It doesn't matter. So the crown of Lower Egypt is red. And it looks like this. It's got this little thing, and it comes up the back like that. It has this little whoop, like that. Okay? That's the crown of Lower Egypt. And the crown of Upper Egypt is white. It has this little thing, and it does this little bumpy thing like that. Okay? Together, these two crowns, we have red and white. Lower Egypt is where all the money was made for Egypt, right? Because this is the Nile River Delta, and it moves out into the Mediterranean. Other nations which used red to identify themselves with mercantile trade would be the Phoenicians. And they had red and white sails with bars that looked exactly like the bars on our flag, okay? So these two crowns united then provide red, the secular, and white, the spiritual. Now, why would red be tied with secular stuff? Why would white be tied with spiritual stuff? Here's where the breakdown of these symbols takes place. What is the most immediate evidence of mortality? Blood, right? The blood is the life. Is that not what Bram Stoker said? The shedding of blood is the shedding of life. Blood is red. Blood is tied to mortality. So you literally, in this world, it literally is blood in and blood out. You know, you begin this world as a mess, you end somewhat as a mess, and in between it's a mess. And it all has to do with this idea. So red is tied to mortality. The ocean and ocean-bearing countries establish this tie through what is called admiralty law. And this is actually the mercantile law that describes you as a person and establishes you within your government as, and this is a very complex thing, you're welcome to take it up, look at it. Look up your corporate fiction. Do a Google of your corporate fiction. And essentially, when you are born, this is the process. You come into life, you are born, and you go see the dock, right? And the dock gives you birth. And those are all nautical terms, right? Because when a ship comes into the dock, it has a birth. It's given papers to show what exactly took place and what was detached from the mothership. All of these things become taxable later, like your name on your birth certificate is in capitis majora, which means it's all caps, which means it's not an actual person. That's the same thing that we do for companies. So you have a corporate fiction, And that's part of the symbol of this. I know it's like, but that's all part of this red and this mortality, that from start to finish, you're observed, and the observation has to do with money. The counterbalance to this is what happens in Upper Egypt. In Upper Egypt, this is where the spiritual development takes place. Now, why would white be the spiritual development? If this has to do with mortality, death, and transactions moving from one state to another, which is what happens. In fact, here's another really cool symbol for you. This is called a delta. In terms of science, a delta means it's a point of transition of states from one state to another. So as fresh water is moving towards the Mediterranean north, downhill, by the time it hits the Nile River Delta, there's a transition point where it goes from being fresh water into salt water out here. And so when you see letters which relate to a change in states, they will almost always have to do with the delta, and delta is the fourth character in Greek. And so things that deal with 4 deal with the transition of states. So the 4th of July dealt with the transition of states, get it? Where we move from a state of oppression and dependence to a state of independence. They don't miss this. There's never a missed step. Like the whole idea of 1776, the idea of 76, that is 76, which is also the symbol for Capricorn. So the gas station, which is the union of 76, that's a reference to Saturn, because Capricorn is ruled by Saturn. So it just keeps coming at you, right? So why white? Well, this has to do with what white does for us. White mediates between the oppression of the sun and the earth itself. It's the clouds. So when you see white fluffy clouds, you realize that there will be relief. And if you live in the desert, there will most certainly be relief. So white clouds in the desert, big fluffy white, that means salvation. That means hope. And it ties you to the spirit because clouds are effervescent. They come, they go, they're sublime. They literally sublimate, they disappear. So the idea then is when you pop that crown into this crown, you do a couple really cool things. I really need another tissue paper. Oh, heavens. Yes. Do we have a tissue paper? Oh, there it is, thank you. Everyone live is like, where's the tissue paper? Okay, so when you pop these two crowns together, and this one comes up, this in the middle, you got this little doodad. If you were to look at this from the side, and there's this really cool explosion, a supernova explosion, 1987A, I think it is. I'll pop it up here so you guys can see it, and I'll even pop a slide in it. See, this is why post-production is good. You want to watch this later too. The explosion looks like this, and then it comes out like that, and it's double sheathed or double layered. So it looks just like the crown of Egypt, and then does the same thing on the other side like this. And the idea is that crowns are an establishment of electromagnetic consciousness or presence, which is why Indian chiefs, right, they have the giant-sized ones, or tribal chiefs everywhere. They'll have these huge, huge crowns, displays, because the idea is this is the expression of my consciousness, and it's everywhere. You know? So this here for Egypt then is an expression of his consciousness, and Pharaoh being representative of 2 conscious states. Now the word Pharaoh is very, very important. And the conscious states are that he will now govern both material, temporal affairs, and spiritual affairs. This makes the Pharaoh king and priest. Okay? So priest and king. Secular for king, priest is priest for spiritual stuff. So, But the pharaoh wore one other crown. When it was time to go to war, the pharaoh would wear a blue crown. And so the question then is, what's the deal with the blue crown, and why would you crown this? Remember, this is now an expression of my consciousness. If I put it on my head, that literally is where my head is at. Okay? So it's a complete expression to everyone. They don't have any question. I pop that blue crown on my head, things are going to happen right now. We're going to war. And you do that in Egypt, it was a serious thing. But the question is why? What is it about the nature of the color blue that would lead you to go blue equals war? Because blue is also tied to some kind of protection, right? People think about true blue and all these other positive aspects. Again, you have to consider a desert, and you have to consider people who've endured what I would say they witnessed an actual ecological catastrophe. When Set slew Osiris, Set became the god of the wilderness and the desert because that's what happened. Wilderness and desert overtook Egypt, because when we go back far enough into the record, it's clear that Egypt used to be very wet, that there was a lot of trees all over the place, and now it's not wet. So Set dominated the land of Egypt, took it over, conquered it. And the question then is, remember we talked about who is Pharaoh? Who is Pharaoh? The Pharaoh is a representation, it means the White House. Which of course, who sits in the White House? The president, right? He presides. He's Pharaoh. Anyway, he's got the colors. Anytime the president stands and he talks, he's got 2 of these or 4. And you'll notice that you can communicate to the entire world what the talk is going to be about. So if you see the president ever get up, and blue is all over the place where they fold the flag down. Remember, this is stagecraft, everybody, stagecraft. There is not a thing that goes on of camera live for the country of the United States that's not somehow or another massaged, tended to, or dealt with. And how they fold the flag for public consumption is a big deal. You see a lot of blue, that means he's going to talk about fighting. If you see a lot of this stuff, a lot of red or white, then he's going to talk about national domestic issues and issues of trade. And seriously, that's exactly what happens. Now, Pharaoh means the White House. The White House, and this is sort of, you have to chain this out. The goddess Nephthys is the woman of the house. Both she and Set have red hair, which ties them to mortality. In other words, that they are gods of this world, okay? And they're the only Egyptian gods that have red hair. The rest have lapis lazuli hair, which ties them to a previous state. Pharaoh is the sun. And so when Pharaoh stands up before Egypt and says, I am the living incarnation of Re, I'm the sun. I made flesh. The truth is we all are. That's the beauty of it, right? All of our consciousness is quickened. There's not a person on this planet who doesn't know everything to that big ball in the sky. Because if it wasn't there, we'd all be done, right? There would be no planet, it would be cold, it'd be nothing, we'd be dead. So the sun is everything, and Pharaoh wearing both crowns, white and red, means that he is conducting his presence over spiritual and secular affairs. The sun does one other thing though. The sun engages in a battle every single day. And the battle the sun engages in is against every other god and star in the universe. And quite literally, the sun's pretty badass, because every morning it completely occludes and then occults the fact that there's a universe out there. You would never know. It won. It's just blue sky. That's it. That's all you get to see. Blue sky. There are no planets. There are no other stars. It's just this star. So when you're looking at it in terms of Kabbalah or trying to decipher a script and you see a solar character, you're going to look for someone who's a show-off, who's all about me. But also someone who's saving the day, right? Someone who will rush in. Someone who will be selfless and self-sacrificing. And maybe someone who runs out of gas once in a while, like Iron Man. there's a little and now he can't fight because he's got to recharge. The sun has to recharge, right? So it fights all day long and then it's got to stop. And then it gets back up and fights again. So solar characters in the movies will do that, where they'll have a limited duration of time that they can engage. So the sun is engaging in warfare, and so blue is tied to the act of conducting war. So, what we know right now, just from understanding history and understanding Egyptology and symbology, is that the red announces to the world that our country is an economic power. And that first and foremost, from top to bottom, because the first color on the top and the last color on the bottom is about economics. Okay? Fascinatingly enough, there are 7 bars. 7 is a number that is tied specifically to this star. So the septagram, like a 7-pointed star, speaks specifically to the use with the sun. We have 7 days of week. We have 7 visual colors in the natural spectrum. There's all sorts of 7s that are tied significantly to the presence of this star. And all of them are tied to our mortal experience. So 7 and the red, top to bottom. When you get to the white, there are 6 bars of white. And 6 should immediately pull any esotericist's mind right back to the planet Saturn and the goddess Isis. And Isis was represented also by a white vulture known as Nekhbet. And Nekhbet wears the white crown of Upper Egypt. So you can see this chain of custody wherein the spiritual force is then tied to Saturn. And as I mentioned last week, every single religion out there that gives you any kind of instruction on how you are to behave is by de facto is tying you back to Saturn. Because Saturn's all about rules. Saturn's all about propriety. You're only supposed to have sex at this time. You're only supposed to party at this time. You should raise your kids at that time. It's Ecclesiastes, right? In everything, there is a season. So, the other thing to think about with the other thing to consider with the 6 bars, and this will get a little bit freaky. I really wasn't sure if I wanted to share every last symbolic nook and cranny of the flag, but I couldn't resist, so we're going to hit it. But, so we have 7 red, and we have 6 white. And so the 7 red gives us a 7-pointed star. And the 6 white give us that. Because if you take the 6 bars and put them together, they're all equidistant, the same length. If they're touching each other, it forms a Shapkanah, or a Star of David. Now, this is not a uniquely Jewish symbol in spite of what everyone would like to believe. And I have a video online discussing human ancestry and this symbol and the fact that it is everywhere, in every country, every continent, and it is descriptive of something much greater. Feel free to check that video out, Human Ancestry and the Esoteric. Definitely, this is an extraordinarily significant symbol, which we will be discussing at greater length in other classes. But for now, I want you to consider what is a prepositional phrase. When I say the Star of David, what does that do, language-wise? It means that it's the possession of David's, right? That's like saying the car of David, or the phone of David. It's my thing. So the question then must be asked, who is David, right? Who is David? You have to deconstruct names in alchemy because names are everything. Names tell you everything, but you have to bring it all the way back to its core. David is Hebrew for beloved, okay? So this means beloved. So now, if you think only for a moment, Revelation was written by John the Beloved, okay? So that's a designation, and you understand that John also is Jack, and Jack is Jacob, and Jacob is the heel grabber, which ties Jacob to Mithra, who's grabbing the heel of the bull, which means Jacob is the son. So David is the son. So the Star of David is Saturn. And the Star of Isis is the sun. And we'll talk about the Star of Isis in just a second, because her star looks like this. It's a 5-pointed star. And we have 50 of them all over our flag. So this symbol, for all of you guys out there who are, the 5-pointed star is nothing to be afraid of. None of these stars they're just geometries for one. But this particular geometry is unique, because this geometry right here is the result of an intersection between Venus and the Earth as they orbit the sun periodically. And so as they go around together, Venus and the sun will link up like this. And they'll hang along together for a little bit, and then they'll break up, and then they'll link up again, and they'll hang out. And each one of those, it forms a pentagram. Okay? But it's the object in the center that's of importance. They are surrounding the sun. They're orbiting the sun together. So the Star of Isis, and Isis is Saturn, is the sun. Those are possessive terms, prepositional terms relating to each other. So this one here, in association with the US flag, is an association with the goddess Isis, who is also known as Columbia in poetry. So the country of the United States is run from what part of the country? The District of Columbia, the District of Isis. And that district conducts war powers. It's amazing, right? Like this is what, so when you look at this then, so these 50 stars, they all are representative of the sun. They're speaking to the sun and nations which are Luciferian and built on principles of freedom and liberty. That's what our country was founded on. We're going to go through a rather painful transition in the next few years, because freedom and liberty, as we're seeing, are going to take a continued back seat to law and order. It's a byproduct of living in the age of Aquarius. Everything leading up to this point was all about freedom and expansion and imperialism. Over. We're not doing it. I would doubt if we'd even get one more state on this flag. Sorry, Puerto Rico, but I'm not seeing it happen in your future. And when I explain to you why, you will probably be like, oh, I get it. So why, right? So first off, so you guys clear on this? So from top to bottom, the United States is an economic power, right? That conceals its spiritual force within itself. It's separate from the state, and that it allows for multiple expressions of spiritual pursuit. And the one thing that brings us together every time is war. That's it. Which is why the blue is conducted in a complete square field, right? With the 50 stars, because this is when we unify. Now, we might have all sorts of fights between ourselves, but don't you dare pick on us, because rah, and then we do this, and we pull that red, white, and blue out, and we unify as a single nation. That's a cool thing to me. I actually really like the flag for that. That message alone, to me, is quite beautiful. That we are focused on things that cause us to grow as a nation, that we leave ourselves alone spiritually, and don't pick on us, because that's what we do. So that is what's learned as a result of deconstruction of an extraordinarily elegant cognitive thought form, which is the flag of the United States. Now, there's one more thing. The positionality of the stars. There's a reason they're placed as they are, and they reveal something that to some might be alarming. Because I understand that the flag is constructed on kabbalistic principles, and because I understand that the 7 and the 6 ties itself to the idea of Capricorn, which ties itself to Saturn, but also 7 and 6 make 13. It's a secondary reference to Saturn through the god Osiris, who was dismembered by his brother, and only 13 parts were recovered by Isis and Nephthys. The 14th, his phallus, was missing. So 13 ties to this. Yeah, in fact, just a brief segue since I saw your face scrunch up. Horus is produced as a result of what can only be a cuckold of Osiris, because obviously he couldn't have a phallus, And Isis in the record supplies a golden phallus and then has Horus, who looks nothing like his dad, right? Because he's got a bird face, right? Isis and Osiris both have human countenance because they're gods of a previous age. Any god of a latter age will have an animus, an animal countenance, because they're tied to Set and his influence. So who's his daddy, right? Horus's daddy is Set. So anyway, so as we're counting these, let's take a look here for just a moment. We have 50 stars on this flag, and they could have arranged them in quite a few different arrangements. We actually, and I had to look this up this morning because I wanted to make sure my facts were right. The 50th star was the state of Hawaii in 1959. So the timing of this again is perfect because you would expect that as you move into the age of Aquarius that you would pull this star out. Now, let's take a look at this flag for a second. So on the top, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 stars, okay? And what you want to do is you want to group these into groups of 2. All right, so we have 6 stars, and then right under that, we have 5 stars, okay? So this gives us the number 11, all right? When you look at the flag and you're making a graph, because to decipher a code like this, you look for where the repetition resumes, okay? So the first 2 lines are unique, and then they just are repeating those 2 lines over and over and over again, right? So in a codified statement, at the point of repetition, that's where you stop decoding and you go back and you look at what's being presented. So we have a 6 and a 5, which gives us an 11. Then if you go down horizontally on the side, going down sideways, right? So this is across, going down the side, we have a 5, and then we have a 4, okay? And that's the pattern there, 5 and a 4, which gives us a 9. Nine 11, ring a bell, it's written in the flag. Now, you have to realize 9/11 was used many times before as an opportunity, like in 1991. George Herbert Walker Bush got in front of the House of Representatives and Senate combined and delivered a delightful talk about the New World Order, where he absolutely calls it a New World Order and talks about how this coming age will be an age of law, where the law of the jungle won't work and the rule of order will prevail. Okay, that was 9/11, 1991. 10 years later, we get a brand new 9/11, which completely alters the consciousness of every human on the planet. And it happened on this flag's territory. Now, what are these numbers? These numbers represent kabbalistic points within the tree of life. So I'm going to quickly just draw the tree for you. Okay? This is the tree of life. When counting down, it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Okay? This is an area, and we're going to cover this later, tied to the moon, and it's called Yesen. This particular point in the tree is tied with the unconscious mind, the collective unconscious mind. And it's a gateway point in meditation, when you're working through a meditation into a higher ordered state under either Venus or Mercury or anything else. Right up here is the invisible 11th Sephiroth, which is in what is known as Da'ath. It's the great void. So the idea of having something tied to this progress is the idea of being able to move it from something like an American dream in an unconscious state to something beyond, to leap the gap, to create something new. So anytime you see this kind of used, a 9/11 reference, it's skipping the number 10, right? The idea is that it's those who are preaching all the fear stuff, they're like, they want to be gods and they want to take over. No, this is something you can use for yourself as well. This is a meditative concept, because 9 ultimately has this really unique mathematical property where it either is referential to itself in multiplication or it disappears entirely in addition when you break it down numerologically. So that, let's say if I go 9 times 2, that gives me 18, which then reduces back to 9, right? And if I go 9 plus 2, that gives me 11, right? Which then the 9 disappears entirely because this reduces down to a 2. Right? 9 is magic. So you throw 9 into an esoteric equation, and it allows you to do a couple different things. You throw it into the construction of a nation, and you can do a great number of other things. Of course, there's more, but I don't want to blow your brains away too much. How much time do we have? Oh, and we're almost done. Look at that. Oh my gosh, I can't believe I got us through the flag, you guys. Okay, you guys have any questions? Because this is totally a good time to ask questions. Did that blow your minds? Are you guys like, whoa? So you proud to be American? You should be. This alone, this symbol's worth standing up for. It really is. The ideas behind this, because these are good ideas. These are beautiful, right? This is neat, and something that's definitely worthwhile. So next week we're going to talk about mythology. It's going to be fun. You're getting the sense. Yeah, I'm kind of dipping you in the water a little bit at a time, right? Last week we just sort of talked about that alchemy deals with this kind of stuff, and then this week we dipped in real heavy duty into a singular symbol that all of us see every day. We've probably all stood up and sung about it or pledged allegiance to it, but now you know what it's about and where its roots and core are. I think that's awesome. All right, any other questions? No? All right, I'll see you guys next week. Thank you, everybody. You guys are awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Internet. We'll see you next week.